Hi, I'm Tracie Goodman, and I am the Agriculture and Natural Resource Extension Agent for McCreary County Cooperative Extension. And one of the things that I try to do is base my programs around questions that I'm getting at the time. So earlier this season, I was getting a lot of questions about gardening, so I've done tons of garden programs. This time of year, I'm getting lots of turf-related questions. So people having trouble with their grasses drying up in their yard, or maybe they've had trouble getting certain types of grass established in their yard. So I'm going to go over basics today of lawn establishment, care, and maintenance, and I'm going to discuss some of the common problems that people are having. So this is sort of just an overview of some of the things that you need to know and be aware of before you get started with lawn establishment. So all of the methods that you use, the grass that you select that you want to seed, the time of year that you seed and try to establish your lawn, all of this determines the quality and maintenance of your lawn. Now, Kentucky is located in a transition zone, so this means that we get both very hot and very cold weather. So both cool season and warm season grasses can be grown in Kentucky, but also developing a lawn that is conducive to this type of climate can be a little bit challenging. So one of the things that you need to know is know your property and know your growing conditions. So you want to kind of take a look around your yard, notice if it is in full sun or if part of your yard is shaded. Do you have soil that is well drained but also retains moisture? Is your yard flat or does it have a slope to it? And one of the most important things that you can do before getting started is to get a soil test. Now, we offer this service for free at the McCreary County Extension Office for McCreary County residents. So I highly encourage you to do this before you start seeding anything. You want to know what nutrients are actually in your soil before you get started planting so that you can make a plan that is specific to what you're trying to grow. So a common question is, which grass should I plant in my yard? Kentucky, we all know it is the bluegrass state, right? But funnily enough, bluegrass actually really struggles during summer heat. So the most well-adapted turf grass for Kentucky weather is actually tall fescue. This is because it has a good heat and cold tolerance. It adapts to a wide variety of soils, so you can grow tall fescue in very poor soil. So one of the things that you want to make sure, though, is when you purchase tall fescue, you want to make sure that it is a turf type tall fescue, because there is tall fescue that is used for forages and you don't want that kind of grass in your yard necessarily. And Kentucky 31 is a popular variety of tall fescue, but you don't want to use it in a lawn setting because it's really not recommended to use it as turf grass. So perennial ryegrass is also used in some turf settings because it germinates quickly and it is good for slopes. Fine fescue is used sometimes when you have a lot of shade in your yard because it is very shade tolerant. And Bermuda or zoysia grass these are both warm season grasses, but they offer good drought and pest tolerance. So again, going back to the last slide, just know your property, know what your soil conditions are, and that will help you a lot with deciding what grass you should plant. So now that we've picked a grass, when do we plant it? This depends if you have cool season or warm season grasses. So cool season grasses, which are things like Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue, you want to plant them around mid-August to late September for a variety of reasons. During this period of time, they have reduced competition from things like crabgrass and goosegrass. There are cooling temperatures, fall rains, and this allows you to have about 7 to 8 months of establishment prior to summer stresses, which can really slow down your growth rate on cool season grasses. Mid-February to mid-March is the second best time of year to plant, but when you do plant them during this time, you will likely need to use a pre-emergent herbicide to knock out some of that weed competition that you don't really have if you plant in the fall. And if you're installing sod, you can install sod basically at any time, but it is still best to install it when the weather conditions are right. So you don't want to put sod in when it's really hot and dry out. You want to wait for that cooler weather before you lay your sod down. Now, warm season grasses like Bermuda grass and zoysia grass, you want to plant those in late May or June because they like those warmer soil temperatures. And rule of thumb is you want your nighttime air temperatures to consistently be greater than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. This results in much faster and easier establishment for these warm season grasses. So one of the most important things that you can do, again, kind of falls back to, we were talking about soil testing, is preparing your soil. If you don't have good soil conditions, establishment is going to be really, really hard for a new lawn. So if you're starting brand new, say you just built a house, you don't have anything there, what you want to make sure of first is that your lawn is properly graded. And typically this would be, you want your lawn to slope away from your house, you want all of your construction debris removed, and you want to have at least 4 to 6 inches of topsoil down before you go to plant anything. And as we said, get a soil test. You want to apply fertilizer and lime as recommended prior to planting. And fertilizing and making sure you have those correct nutrients in your soil is going to promote deep rooting, which helps a lot with establishment and maintenance down the road. So if you do all of this stuff up front, it's really going to help you later on. And you want to add soil improvements if needed. So say if you have really clay-like soil or your soil texture isn't really conducive to growing a lot of turf grass, you can amend with organic matter to improve that soil texture. If you have a newly graded lawn, you want to make sure that it is allowed to settle before you plant any type of grass or before you put sod down. So general rule is about 2 to 3 good rains or some good irrigation will aid in this settling process. Another question, seed or sod? So there are advantages to both. Seed is obviously much less expensive. And using quality seed really reduces your chance of weeds. So just because you use seed doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be fighting weeds. It all depends on your seed quality. The downside to using seed is that if you want that instant result, you're not going to get it from seed. It's going to take a few months to establish a good lawn. And there's also soil erosion risk when you plant with seed. Now, sod, you obviously get immediate results with sod. It instantly looks pretty, you have a good healthy lawn down. It impedes weed growth because those sod mats push down the weeds. You reduce your risk of erosion because your grass is already in place. You don't have to worry about bare dirt. But a downside of sod is obviously that it's much more expensive. Irrigation is very important to maintaining a healthy lawn and promoting your turf establishment. So some of the signs that you can use to determine if your lawn needs to be watered is 1, if footprints remain in the grass long after they are made. 2, if the soil from the root zone is really powdery and dry. 3, no rain for at least a week during dry or hot weather. So recently we came out of a pretty dry spell. It hadn't rained in a couple of weeks. So that was a time that irrigation was definitely needed if you had a lawn. And 4, sometimes turf on high spots becomes a little bit discolored. So it can be a yellow or bluish gray color. Now the best time to irrigate is in early morning. And your general rule is that you need about an inch of rainfall or irrigated water per week. So there are plenty of ways to measure this. You can use rain gauges. You can use, if you're using an irrigation system, you can place little cans around your yard in different spots to determine if you're getting enough in each area. The main important thing is just to make sure that you irrigate when it's needed. So now we'll talk about some common problems. Brown spots. A lot of people get these in their yard, and it could be disease related. There is a disease called brown patch disease, and this is when you get these little circular brown spots in your yard. It's definitely common in tall fescue. So this is in the top 2 pictures. You'll see these little circular spots. They vary in size and they're really discolored. But also, brown spots could just be a sign of heat stress, which is really common this time of year. I mean, we're in the middle of summer, it's very hot and dry. And the picture on the bottom was actually submitted to me by a client who was having issues with certain spots in his yard becoming really dry. And one of the issues that he also had is that his soil was different texture in different places. Some of his soil was really compacted. It didn't hold a lot of moisture. So one of the things that you can do definitely is consistent irrigation. That's the key. But if you have issues like this in your yard where certain areas just don't seem to be holding a lot of water, you can use a wetting agent, which is something that you can purchase at a landscape store. It comes in roughly a quart jug that you can mix up and put on those spots, and this is going to help it retain more moisture in those certain spots if you have trouble with those. So another really common problem with lawn establishment is that you are going to be competing with weeds. One of the most helpful things that you can do is to know your weeds, and if you are incorporating herbicides, use herbicides that are selected for those type of weeds to help you eradicate them. And also, you may have to incorporate the use of pre-emergent and post-emergent herbicides. So this definitely depends on your timing of planting. Like we said, tall fescue, it's a cool season grass. It does better if you plant it in the fall so that it's not competing with some of those weeds that emerge in warmer weather. Mowing at appropriate times and at the appropriate height is also really beneficial to weed control because your weeds typically tend to grow faster than your desired grasses sometimes. So your weeds are going to get taller, they're going to shade out your grasses that you want to grow. So if you keep those all mowed down at the correct height, it will significantly reduce that competition. And the chart that's on the screen is recommended time of year for herbicide applications on your target weeds. So this is where knowing your weeds comes into play. There are some weeds that you can treat pre-emerge, and this would require the use of a pre-emergent herbicide. And there are some weeds that you can control post-emerge with a post-emergent herbicide. And it definitely depends on the time of year as to what type of herbicide that you want to use. Now, another fairly common problem is thatch buildup. And as you can see in the picture, this shows what thatch is, and it is a layer of dead and living stems and roots that are accumulated on the surface. So you can see all of that dead material underneath your living grass. There's quite a bit built up here. There are two ways to fix thatching problems. One is to use a dethatching machine. This actually cuts through the thatch into the soil, or you can aerify your soil, which removes the soil cores and actually redeposits them. And the best time to manage for bluegrass and fescue lawns is during the spring or fall. Another problem people have is maybe germination, but some of the things that can significantly help you with this is to buy certified seed and use the appropriate seeding rate for that grass. You also want to plant grasses that are going to grow best on your property. So again, think back to, you want to know your property. Do you get full sun? Do you have part shade? Do you need to plant any shade tolerant varieties? Do you need to plant more drought tolerant varieties? Just think about that before you purchase any type of seed. And timing of planting, as we said, is extremely important. Irrigation is extremely important. Amending your soil is extremely important. So all of the things that we talked about really come into play with germination of your seeds. And if you're trying to establish a lawn and some things are not working out for you, just keep trying. Do not compare your yard to your neighbor's already well-established lawn that they have no issues with and base it on the type of grass that they grow, because your property and your soil may need something totally different than your neighbors. Even though they're close together, does not mean that your soil is going to be exactly the same as your neighbors and your growing conditions are going to be exactly the same. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to establish a lawn. Sometimes you have to keep trying and undergo some failures before you have true success. And this is basically the reference that I use to pull all this information from. It is the University of Kentucky Turfgrass Science website. There are obviously plenty of things that I didn't get to go over in this presentation. Definitely one of the big things that people struggle with during this time of year is pests, especially moles. But have no fear, if you visit this website, there is basically a solution to every problem that you have. They have tons of resources, and they also have an entire publication that is dedicated specifically to the grasses in Kentucky and how to choose the right grass for your lawn. And this is my contact information. Obviously, if you have any questions about anything in this presentation or lawn care in general, please reach out to me and I will help you in any way that I can. Thank you for watching.